Hey there, welcome to the Aquafit Club. I'm Jelaine and I'm your host. And today we're going to talk about lunging your horse. And basically there are 4 different phases that we're going to have in this video. We're going to start off by, well, what are the reasons for lunging my horse? Why would I want to do that? Then we're going to talk about the benefits to lunging. We'll talk about equipment that you need in order to do that lunging. And then last of all, we will talk about how to do it and give you a little demonstration on how to set those things up. So first of all, let's think of, there are probably 5 good reasons I would have for wanting to lunge my horse. Number 1 being observation. I want to be able to assess what his movements look like. I need to see if there is any physical limitations that he has that day. You know, if he's coming out of his stall, first thing, he might be a little stiff. Maybe he's a little stiff and it, to one side or another side, maybe he bends well, maybe to the left a little bit better than he bends to the right. It's going to give me an idea of what I'm working with, any asymmetries or things like that, even before I start to ride. Number 2 reason is high energy. Energy release. If you've got a horse and that horse tends to be a very high energy horse when he comes out of the stall or when you're getting ready to saddle up, you might want to work a little bit of that energy off. So it's a good idea to give them a nice, constructive, but controlled situation in which they're able to release that high energy and then get to a point where they're just a little bit more relaxed and they're really going to be more adept at the training and riding that you want to be able to do. Third reason I might want to is to be able to check for lameness. If I have to call the vet out and he needs to assess lameness, they're going to want to see how that horse is moving. So I'm going to put that horse on a lunge line so they can see, without a rider or anything else being on their back, what we're looking at. Fourth reason I might want to assess that horse is for rehab, maybe after an injury, okay? And say I can't really ride him after this injury, but I really want to build back that strength and mobility that he has, and I can do that in a controlled manner by putting him on a lunge line. Last good reason I could think of is if I have a young horse that I'm working with. Maybe you're working with a young horse that doesn't know anything, and so this can be a very good training mechanism for you to use with that horse, because you can get that horse acclimated to having tack on its back without actually putting a rider on its back, and be able to get him used to following commands and voice cues and things like that. So there's a lot of good reasons for lunging your horse, and there are probably a lot of good benefits too. I know there's some significant physical as well as mental benefits for your horse to put them through a lunging activity. One great benefit would be that lunging your horse adds to your horse's variety in his exercise routine, okay? And it can improve fitness and conditioning of your horse. Now remember that when these things are done properly, they can have massive benefits for your horse emotionally as well as physically. So building muscle, also improving your horse's bending and suppleness, especially if he tends to be stiff in one direction or the other. It can enhance balance and coordination, because what you're encouraging the horse to do is be able to travel around you on a circle, on a natural bend, on a constant bend, but keeping themselves down so they're not motorcycling around on a turn like this, but they're actually traveling upright and horizontal on a plane. Other benefits I could think of right off the bat would be great communication. It builds trust and a bonding when you're able to work with your horse on a line, because you may start with a lot of vocal cues and then figure out when your horse is very connected to you that you don't have to say anything at all. You can just connect with him and control him, direct him using certain body languages. It's interesting. Last thing I could think of is just a good foundation for training for young horses, okay? And there are also some things that you need to consider, because I've seen people do things in lunging where they're not really cognizant of what the horse is doing. So for instance, you don't want to just start like out here in an open field lunging your horse. make sure that you choose a nice location. A good location if you're just starting to do this would be in a round pen. Okay, you can put that horse on a line inside the round pen and teach that horse how to lunge properly around you. And that way the horse can't just, take a line and run off somewhere and get away from you. And you have a little bit of control in that environment. Same thing if you're just inside say you're inside the indoor arena, or you're in maybe this outdoor arena. You got a lot of space, but you still have an enclosure, which gives you a little bit of safety feature. But remember, start that horse off on a small circle going around you. Don't just feed out a lot of line if you're not sure if that horse is very well behaved on a lunge line. So, equipment that you need to lunge your horse. Now, I've got quite a number of items that are right here. And just a little note, you don't need to start with all of these items, okay? If you're beginning, you want to really have somebody that knows how to do this and can help you with this when you're starting. But the one thing that you need would be a halter. And if you're working a horse for training purposes, I like to have a rope halter, preferably with the 4 knots. And in this case, it has the lead rope that is attached to it. Now you can get this lead rope in different lengths, but since you're going to be lunging the horse, I would prefer to start with either like a 12-foot or a 14-foot line. That way you can lengthen and shorten the circle, the diameter of the circle, as the horse travels around you. But this is great just to start with. The knots right here put a little bit of pressure on either side of that horse's face in certain spots, so it gives you a little bit of control and you have better communication. Now if you have a nice rope halter but you don't have a lead that's this long and attached to it, you can always just clip one on right here at that loop. Now the only difference is that it does provide a little more action in here when you're trying to communicate to that horse, but it'll be okay just as you're starting off. So really all you need is a halter like this with a long lead to it and perhaps a lunge whip, okay? And that lunge whip, these lunge whips come in different sizes and lengths, and this one has a long lash on it. So that way, when I'm utilizing this, I'm really pointing this at the horse's flank, okay? And those are really the 2 things that you really need in order just to start lunging. Now, as I get a little bit more advanced in my lunging, I'm going to utilize a couple other pieces of equipment. For example, I might use a surcingle, and you notice the surcingle has rings on it, and that fits on the horse's body, sort of like wrapping around and attaching a girth, okay? But it gives me different places where I can put side reins, okay? And these are side reins that I might want to utilize, and those are for different exercises, usually a little bit more advanced exercises as you start to progress, okay? The other thing that I do need to have a nice lunge line. And these lunge lines come in different lengths. You can get them anywhere from like 30 feet, 35 feet, or even longer than that. It just depends on how you want to start. But since if I'm utilizing my rope halter that has a lead attached to it, then I don't need to purchase this until a little bit later. It would be okay. But if you want to get this and use it with your regular halter, that's okay too. Okay? Now, if I want to utilize my bridle, say for instance I want to lunge my horse right before I'm getting ready to ride, okay? And this is the bridle that I'm utilizing right here. So if I want to lunge my horse before I ride, I've got his bridle on. And normally, like with a regular bridle, you'll have that throat latch that comes down around here. I'm going to use that throat latch, or in this case, I'm going to use this jaw strap to secure the reins. Because since the reins are going to be here and they're pretty long, they're going to be flopping around, they could possibly come up and over his head if you were to drop his head while we're lunging. So I want to make sure that those are going to be secured. I'm going to twist them around just a little bit. And then I'm going to undo this strap. Or in this case, if you've got a throat latch. And then I'm just going to clip it back on the bottom hole. And that'll be enough just to secure that this doesn't come over the top of his head. Okay? Now, the second thing that I'm going to need to do is take my line. Now, I want to make sure I've got nice loops in this. So, I might take this. So I have an even number of loops when I start off. And put it in my free hand. I'll take this part and I'm going to feed this through his bit. So I'm going to take it through the bit here, bring it up and over the top, crossing over the pole. And then I want to clip this to the other side of his bit. Now, as I'm lunging, I've got him traveling on a circle, so I'm going to step out and away from him. So he's going to be traveling in this circle around me, tracking to the left. Now, when I want to change directions, though, I am going to have to stop him. I have to stop him, and then I'm going to have to undo this and thread it through the other direction before I can travel to the right. Now, if I'm just lunging my horse, say for instance I only have about 20 or 30 minutes to work with him, but I do want to work on some of his fitness and cardiovascular, I may just go to my lunging cavesson. So I'm not going to ride, so I don't need to worry about putting this over top of my bridle or anything. I'm just going to put my lunging cavesson on. Now, this particular cavesson I really like because, number one, you can see here the metal fittings on them, and it's got a nice padded nose band right here. And basically, I'm going to attach my line here in the front of the horse's nose. Okay? Now, the other thing that I like about this, they have padding here on the top and padding right here at the brow. But if you notice, this is something slightly different, and that's where this attaches. This is not a throat latch. You will see some cavessons, they have a throat latch, and it comes up just like a regular halter, and it's attached here. Okay, and then they have the rings coming across the nose. The only problem that I have found with this in my experience is that sometimes when you're pulling on that lunge line, you can't see the other side of that horse's face. So when you have a lunging cavesson that has that throat latch, sometimes it pulls this cheek piece over, and it can actually damage the horse's eye on the other side, and you can't see it. Whereas with this particular one, and it's kind of fashioned after the German ones that I saw that they make, this thing comes underneath the jaw. So it actually prevents this piece right here from moving in the direction of the horse's eye when you're doing your lunging. Now, when you've got this particular lunging cavesson on your horse's face, notice that the metal fittings are pretty heavy metal, okay? And it prevents this from sliding too much around on the horse's face. So where it's attached right here at the nose, if I'm traveling and he's tracking to the left, it's going to pull his head with very slight pressure, but notice it doesn't slide around and it doesn't move this cheek band over here. Okay? And if I need to lengthen or shorten, it does not disrupt the movement of the horse's head either. Because if I am standing in a static lunging position and I want to feed that line out, I have all my line in one hand. So as I'm standing here and I'm trying to give him more line, you can see that it starts to pull and sort of yank on this horse's nose right here and on this fixture. Same thing as if I had the fixture attached back here and the loop underneath his chin. It's still going to disrupt his head. Now, if I'm in this position where I'm going to be in motion with the horse, my hand is able to feed through that line and give him a little more lengthening in this rope by just letting it slide through my hand. I just ask him to move his shoulder out and away from me. Move that way for a minute, second, babe. And as he moves, I can let this slide through my hand because the excess loop is over here. This way I can do this all day long and it's not going to disrupt his head. So now that we've shown you the two different kind of setups for getting your horse prepared to lunge, now let's do a little demonstration on the lunging. And basically there's two different types or different ways of lunging your horse. Now the most basic way is what I call static lunging. And basically you're forming a perfect triangle between you and your horse. So if you think of a slice of pizza pie, it's a perfect triangle. Now you think of yourself as being the point of that triangle right here. Now your lunge line is going to form one side of that slice. Your lunge whip will form the other side of that slice, and then the nice curve that we have for that beautiful crust is going to be your horse's body. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stand right there in the center, and then that horse is going to travel around you in a circular fashion. Now remember that horses don't naturally out in the pasture run 20-meter circles. They don't do that. So it is important that you remember we are teaching and training our horses to travel around us on a nice bend, a continuous bend, but using good balance and coordination. That means they're not falling in, they're not pushing out with their shoulder, and they're not tilting or dropping their head. And those are some things that you can look for because those are usually common errors that we find, and there's usually something behind that. And in later videos we can talk about your fixes for those types of things. The other thing that we want to make sure of is that as we send our horse out, you never ever ever want your lunge line on the ground. Okay? You don't want it to have so much line out there that it drops on the ground, because potentially that could be a very dangerous thing for both you and your horse. For some reason your horse might decide to turn or spin around. Now you've got that line tangled around the horse's legs or feet, or he's twisting around, or you could possibly step on it. Okay, so you're so focused on the horse going around you, next thing you realize is all of a sudden you're tangled in that line. That's not a good place for you to want to be, especially if that horse were to jerk or to do something, go to the side, or all of a sudden decide to kick his little heels up and go a little faster. Can have a bad situation that you don't want to deal with. Okay? The other thing that you need to remember about your line is that you want to have it looped in your hand. Okay, your excess is always looped in your hand. It's never going to be anywhere tied around your wrist or your arm or parts of your hand or your fingers or anything like that, because if they would happen to take off suddenly and jerk that line, that's enough pressure to snap some little bones in your hand or your wrist. Okay, now the first thing we're going to demonstrate here is in that static lunging, in that perfect little triangle, you're going to want to make sure that your horse has got his eye on you. Okay, and remember their eyes are positioned on the side of their head, so they're watching your body language as well as picking up your verbal cues. And as you give verbal cues, you want to make sure that you're consistent. That's how you build good communication between you and your horse. Okay, so as that horse is traveling around you and you want that horse to go through different transitions of gaits, make sure you have a different cue for each gait. Like for instance, you can say, and walk on, and ask that horse to walk forward. And when you get ready to ask that horse to trot, the intonation in your voice is going to go up. And trot, or you can say, and trot on, but the intonation is to go up because what you're doing is asking them to pick that energy up and move into that next gait. Same thing when you want them to go from maybe a trot to a canter. Okay, and canter, but it sounds a little bit different, and you may even want a clicking sound. I have 3 different clicking sounds that I use if I want that horse to walk. If I want to ask that horse to trot, I'm gonna cluck. And if I want to ask that horse to canter, I'm gonna kiss. And I can oftentimes bundle all of these things together until my horse really understands what I want him to do. And then I can start pulling cues away from that. But when you're starting off, you want to be as clear and consistent in your communication as possible, especially since you're a new horse owner and this horse is new to you. You're going to find, though, that your horse is, once he's connected and very bonded to you, he's going to know what you want him to do even before you ask. Now, the second way of lunging your horse is not necessarily what I call static lunging. It's more like in motion. And my horse really loves this, mainly because I'm not standing in the center making him move. I'm actually moving with him. So the hand position and my body position, you'll see, is a little bit different. Instead of me facing and squaring off at my horse and sort of walking around in a very small circle, I am now parallel to my horse. So my shoulder really is more like almost in a leading position, but I've got some distance in between. And I'm moving with the horse. Now, if you notice that my left hand is really holding the line almost like it is a rein. Okay, and all of the excess then is in my inside hand closest to my horse. I have the loops of the excess in that rein, in that hand, along with my lunge whip. Now, I still have my lunge whip pointed directly at my horse's flank, okay, down it towards the gasket if I want him to move off or pick his energy up, or I need to give him some other little cues. But he's watching as I'm moving around. Now the difference here is that if I want to feed him some line and move him out and away from me, I don't disrupt this headset. Okay, I can just feed that line right through my hand and lengthen it out and let him go through. If I am in a triangular position and I want to feed line, it becomes a little jerky because I'm kind of like throwing line out to him, and that's a little disruptive to his headset as he's traveling around. You want to be mindful that when you're teaching your horse proper ways of lunging, that you're not yanking your horse around. Okay, sometimes if a horse is not bending well in a certain direction, you have a tendency to want to pull his nose around. Well, if you're pulling on his nose and pulling his head around, you're also disrupting and creating an imbalance. You're sort of throwing his body off balance because he uses his head and his neck in order to have good balance. So there's some other ways of helping him to improve his bend and suppleness. Just don't think that yanking his head around is going to give you that bend that you're looking for. Okay? So, to recap everything that we've talked about and shown you here in this video, here's some important things to remember. Number 1, know why you want to lunge your horse. Number 2, choose the equipment that works best for you and your horse where you're at right now. Number 3, remember to start with a small circle and then gradually increase as your horse begins to understand what it is you want them to do. And remember to keep that lunge line off the ground at all times for safety. Lastly, be very clear and consistent in your cues and your communication, and have fun. We'll see you in the next video.